Okay, guys, so this worksheet was quite good. It's also nice as practice also if you want to work through it again before your test, because it tests all the different things, okay? The last question was a bit tricky. There were things about the last question that you might not have known how to do. It was a bit of a problem-solving question, so we will look at that one now. But for question one, they gave you an interest rate and it was for 7 years and it was 20,000 Rand, and they asked you how much money is in that account. In the first question, if it was compound interest, and in the second part, if it was simple interest. Okay, so for 1.1, you have your compound interest formula. And guys, you have to know those formulas off by heart. We're not going to give them to you in the test. Okay, you have to memorize them. You need to know which one is simple, which one is compound. And you also need to know that for hire purchase, it's always simple. We're also not going to tell you that you must use simple interest. Okay, if you see the words hire purchase, you need to think immediately simple interest. Okay, so 1.1 and 1.2 there, you put the same values just in the two different formulas, and then you should have gotten those two answers. Let's see quickly, because you have to round off to 2 decimals. So let me just quickly check what it was. Okay, so it was 319. So because the number after the one is, oh, sorry, it's frozen. There we go. It was 319. So because that number is bigger than 5, it had the 1 has to become a 2. Okay, so you have to round it off like that. Okay, number yes. Okay, for number 2, I can't remember what, I think this was just a question on, I don't have that worksheet printed, but just 25,000 Rand. It was 15% for 5 years, and they said it was simple interest. So you just write down your simple interest formula, put in all your values, and then you get your answer. And guys, a question just like this is worth 3 marks. Right now, in a test out of 50, that's already 6% that you are guaranteed to have if you just know your formula and you know where to sub it in and you know how to use your calculator. Okay, so please, I want you to make an effort with the finance stuff. It's nice. It's like easy marks in a sense. All right, for number 3, they gave you 2 different, I think these were 2 investments. So they had A and B, and they asked you which one is better. Okay, so the first one was using simple interest, and it was 14%. Right, so you have your simple interest formula, you put your P value, the investment amount, the 60,000, 14% times 7 years, and you get that answer. Investment B was a compound interest investment, again for 7 years, again 60,000 Rand, but this interest rate was now 10%. Okay, so not 14 like in the previous one. So then you type that into the calculator and you get this amount. Now, guys, when you are investing money, you want a bigger amount at the end of it. Okay, because it's your money that you're going to get back. So which one would you choose? A, all right, that's the bigger amount. But now you must be careful, because if these were 2 loans, right, you would have to say option B. Because remember, when you're taking out a loan, you have to pay that money back. And obviously you would want to pay back less money. All right. So if these were 2 loans, you would say option B. But because they're 2 investments, you choose the bigger one. So you say option A. Okay, so you must just read the question clearly. Was that your question? All right, number 4, that was one where we had to calculate N. So this is what I did with you guys last week, I think on Wednesday, where you have your simple interest formula. Then you fill all of your values in. Now, guys, have you noticed that the A value is always bigger than the P value? Right? It will always be like that. Okay, so if the wording, if the language is confusing you, if you can't figure out from the way that they've written it, which one is your final amount, your A, and which one is your original investment, your P, you can just always remember that A has to be bigger than P. Okay, that's also a nice way of remembering it. So if they've given you 2 amounts, you don't know which one is which, the bigger one is always A. Okay. They told you that the interest rate is 18% times N. That's now the one that we must solve for. Now remember, when we are solving for one of the values in the bracket, You have to do more steps. We have to systematically move stuff away from that n. The first thing is always the number in front of the bracket that you divide by. Then you're left with just the bracket. Now, if there's no number in front, you don't need those brackets anymore. Okay, so that's why I just dropped them. The brackets are actually just there to show that I'm multiplying 18,000 by this whole thing. So if the 18,000 is gone, I don't need the brackets anymore. Okay, now you minus that 1. You're left with just the 18% times n. Then you divide by the 18%. Okay, because on this side, I'm multiplying by it. On the other side, I have to divide by it. And then if you type that into your calculator, it is actually better to just type it in at once. All right, in one step. Then you get 7 years. Now guys, sometimes with these types of questions, you'll get like 7,000,000, like a bunch of zeros, and then maybe a 1. Okay, then you can just write 7. Okay, if it's a whole bunch of zeros and then another number at the end, then you can just say that it is 7. I don't think it happened in this case, but just it might. Okay. For number 5, they gave us the final amount. They said what the investment was worth after 12 years. The interest rate was 11.25%, and it was 12 years. We needed to find how much money was invested originally, so that's P. Okay, remember P is the easy one to solve. It's a one-step equation because we have P multiplied by the whole bracket. So you're just going to move that whole bracket, and the opposite of multiplying by it would be dividing by it. Okay, so there we go. Then you also get your answer. I think this was maybe one where it gave you a bunch of zeros. Let me just check quickly. Oh, 9s was it? Okay. Yeah, let me just show you guys quickly. 0.25 over 100. Yeah, so this is what you get, okay, as your answer. Now, guys, if you have to round to 2 decimals, remember we always round to 2 decimals because it's money. What is this going to become? 9, 9, and then I must round up that 9 because this is an 8. It's a number that's bigger than 5. So what is 99 going to become if I round it up? It's supposed to become 100, hey, which means that I must actually round up this whole number. Okay, so the answer here is actually 130,000. All right, so those are the 2 rounding things to look out for. If you have a bunch of 9s and you must round up these 2 9s, then you're going to round up the whole number. Okay, and if you have a bunch of zeros, then you can just drop those zeros. Okay, those are the 2 rounding things. Okay, we're fine with that. All right, I'm going to just turn the page and then we're going to look at number 6. So here I have 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 next to each other. Now guys, remember with hire purchase, it's also maybe useful to memorize those steps that you have to follow. Okay, the example that we did in class, I broke each question, I broke it down into separate questions, and each question was actually a step. Right, but in a test or exam, and even in this worksheet, they don't always ask it like that. They can ask you to do multiple steps at once. So you need to remember that if they're asking you for the total amount that must be paid back, then that is A, right? The total amount that must be paid back, or I can't actually remember the wording. Let me just quickly check that worksheet. Okay, for number 6, they said calculate the total amount of money that must be repaid on the loan. Now, guys, when you are doing a hire purchase question, you are essentially borrowing money. You're actually borrowing the item in a sense, right? Because you haven't actually paid for it. So that loan amount, the amount that you're actually borrowing from the business, is this balance. All right, but then we know that they are going to add interest to the balance. All right, so this is then the final amount that we have to repay on the loan. The total amount that we must repay on the whole, or that we have paid, or that we are going to pay on the whole sound system, is always the total loan amount plus the deposit. Okay, so that's just something to take note of, that language there. So if they say the total amount that must be repaid on the loan, that is your A value. Okay, you can maybe write that down somewhere if you want. Total amount that must be repaid on the loan is A. Okay, and then you must remember that in order to get A, you first have to do certain steps. You must first calculate your deposit, which they told you is 15% of the cash price. Then you must take the cash price and you must minus the deposit. That gives you your balance, which is your P value. Then you calculate A using that P value. Okay, so it is quite useful to write down like a step list. I think I'll do that for you guys. I'll write down a list of steps for when you're doing hire purchase. All right, and then to actually memorize those steps. Okay, are we fine with that one? 6.1. The language might have confused you a bit, but I hope that it makes sense now. Okay. Then 6.2, they wanted the value of the monthly repayments. So the monthly repayments, yes? So they just said on the loan, because if they just said calculate the total amount repaid, then it would have included the deposit. So when they say on the loan, that is not including the deposit because you've already paid that. So you're not borrowing that amount as well. Okay, so they just say total amount repaid, it's A plus the deposit. But because they said repaid on the loan, that's just A. Okay. All right, 6.2 there, your monthly repayments, that's always A divided by the number of months. All right, now if it's 3 years, we all know that that is 36 months. Okay, and guys, if you don't know that off by heart, you can also just say 31416 divided by 3 times 12. 3 years times 12 months a year. Type that into the calculator, you'll get the right answer. Okay, you don't have to write 36 there. You can write 3 times 12. Then 6.3, that is now asking for the total amount paid for the whole sound system. Okay, so that is always your A amount, because that is the amount that you borrowed plus the interest, and then you add your deposit to that as well. So this sound system was actually worth 24,000 Rand, but because you buy it on hire purchase, you pay 35,000 Rand for it. Okay, and that's what they're asking when they say, how much are you actually paying in total? You've paid interest and you paid a deposit, and altogether it's 35,000 Rand. Okay. And guys, number 6 is a typical test hire purchase question. All right. So you can expect to probably see a question like this in the test or maybe in your year-end exam. All right. This is usually how they ask it. Number 7 was a different way of asking it, a problem-solving question. So I just want to bring that question up on the board quickly so that we can look at how it was given. All right, so this is how the question was given. Right, they gave you a table saying Mr. Thomas receives the following quote from Joshua Dawes. Is Joshua Dawes still a business? that is still operating. Do you guys know about that business? Not. It had like an advert that was like an old man sitting on a couch, and then it was like a big thing at one point. Okay, if you have some time, you can check on YouTube Joshua Door advert. It was quite cute. Okay, so cash price 18,400. 7.1 is asking for the deposit amount. Now, guys, in the table, they're telling you that 12% of the cash price. If you just read the question and you didn't check the table, you wouldn't have known how to do that. Okay, so the deposit is 12% of the cash price. So that is how you get your deposit, 7.1, 12% of, so times the cash price. So 2,208. Okay. 7.2, balance owing. We see that is the next one in the table here. Calculate the amount that Mr. Thomas will have to borrow from Joshua Door. Right, so we just discussed it, guys, the balance owing. So the cash price minus the deposit, okay, that is actually the amount that Mr. Thomas is borrowing from Joshua Door, because that's what he still owes on the, what is this? Oh, they didn't say, on this furniture, I suppose. All right, so the balance owing, that's the amount that he's borrowing from them, because he's getting the furniture, but he hasn't actually paid that amount. So balance owing is always cash price minus deposit, right? So balance owing, cash price minus deposit, 16,192 Rand. So that is actually the amount that he's borrowing. Guys, that is your P amount. Okay, remember the balance owing, the cash price minus the deposit is P. Always, it was the case in the previous one as well, right? If we look in 6.1, balance, cash price minus deposit was this amount, and that became your P value. Okay, so do you see what I mean when I say you can actually memorize these steps? All right, because it's always the same thing, even if the question is asked a bit differently. Now, 7.3 was the difficult one because they said interest is 1,300 Rand. Normally, we tell you what the interest rate is. Okay, we'll tell you interest rate is whatever percent per annum. Now they're telling you the amount of interest that was charged here. And the question 7.3, calculate the interest rate charged on the hire purchase agreement. Now, guys, if you want to calculate the interest rate, the I value, all right, quickly go back in this, in your notes to, you might have it from yesterday. Now, let's actually look at the note that we wrote down together. If we look, go to the note of finding other values. Oh gosh, no, I don't know that. Oh, there we go. We go to the note finding other values using the formula. Example 2. Because we calculated the interest rate there. All right, so it's this note, finding other values using the formula. I think we wrote this down on Wednesday last week. An investment of, so you have your P amount grew to a value of this, which is A, over a period of 9 years. Calculate the simple interest rate. Guys, if you need to find the interest rate, you need to have the other 3 values in that formula. You have to have A, you have to have P, and you have to have N. All right, so we need to know the final amount. And guys, do we remember that the final amount includes interest? The final amount is your original loan, so the amount borrowed from Joshua Door that we just calculated in 7.2, the balance owing, plus the interest. That is your A amount. Now, didn't they tell us here what the interest is? The interest is 1,300. Do we have our P amount? Do we know what P is? What did we calculate in 7.2? We calculated P, right? So we have P. We know that P is 16,192 Rand. And we know that our interest is 1,300. So our A value is going to be P plus your interest. Okay? And that's difficult. We haven't actually used this method of finding A. Normally we use the formula to find A, but we can't do that if we don't know what the interest rate is. all right, because the formula needs the interest rate. They've given us the interest amount. Remember that A is your original loan, which is P plus interest, which they are actually telling us in this question in the table is 1,300 Rand. Okay, so using that, we can calculate that A is going to be P, which is our answer from the previous question. The balance owing, the loan that we're actually taking out from Joshua Door, the amount that we owe them, plus the interest that they gave us in the table. So this is actually our A value, 17,492 Rand. Now, if we have our A value, we have our P value, and we know that N is 3 years, then we can calculate the interest rate. Okay, so this is a very difficult question, guys. I want you to copy that down, please. You would then use that method where you move everything first away from the bracket and then away from the I. All right, and then because we're finding the interest rate, you're going to end up with a decimal that you must first times by 100 and then round off. Okay, so that is then actually the interest rate over here. So 7.3 is quite difficult. That is definitely a problem-solving question. All right, make sure that you write that down. And then we'll talk about 7.4 and 7.5 because that was also new. All right, so in the table, they also gave some information about insurance, right? They said that insurance is 4% of the cash price. So 7.4, that was the answer there. So they asked, what is the amount of insurance? Now, guys, sometimes that happens, all right? Joshua Door was a furniture place. So you had to take out insurance on the furniture. Not quite sure why. But if they tell you that it's 4% of the cash price, that's the same kind of calculation as when you have to find the deposit. All right, the deposit was 12% of the cash price. So we did 12 over 100 times the cash price. If they're telling you that the insurance is 4% of the cash price, it's 4 over 100 times the cash price. All right, now insurance is usually a once-off thing. But if they ask it in the question, they can also say that for every year, you need to add this amount of insurance. What if that was the case here? What if for all 3 years, they had to pay this amount of insurance? What would you do with this to then get the total insurance for the whole 3 years? You would times it by 3, all right? Because if it's this amount for each year, then you would times it by 3 for the number of years. Okay, or if they gave you a monthly insurance rate for the 3 years, you would have to times it by 36. Okay, so it depends on the wording there. You just need to read the question clearly. Now for 7.5, they said you must find the monthly repayments. Now we know that the monthly repayments is always A over the number of months. But in this question, they said including the insurance. So does it then make sense that you have to take A plus the insurance, right? If they're saying including the insurance. Okay, so they are adding a bit of a difference to that question. You have to take your A value plus what the insurance is, and then divide that by 36. Okay. So question 7 was difficult. I hope that it makes sense now that I've explained it, all right, and that you would be able to do it on your own if you saw something like this again. All right, but I will make a list for you guys on hire purchase, all the steps, and I'll post that on Classroom before the end of the week. All right, I must just write that on my to-do list, otherwise I'll forget. Okay. Any other questions on finance? Now we are supposed to start similarity today, but we have assembly at 10:15, and I can't really start similarity in 12 minutes. So what I'm going to give you, let me quickly check this. Oh, let's actually quickly take a look at that practice test. Let's see what the questions look like there. Remote. And just make sure that we have actually done everything that comes up there. Okay, practice test, finance and probability. It says in the instructions, show all appropriate working. Down to 2 decimal places in question 1, but give, oh, that's weird. Anyway, but give fractions in simplified form in questions 2 to 4. Okay, so they're explaining to you here, and this is important, guys. You need to follow these instructions. If you don't, you're going to lose marks. Okay, so if that happens in the test that you're going to write, if they're saying in questions 2 to 4, you have to leave your answers as fractions, then that's what you have to do. Okay, then if you write an answer in decimal form, you're going to lose a mark because you're not following the instructions. Okay, question 1. Casey is offered 12% per annum compound or 13% per annum simple on an investment. Remember, for an investment, you want more money out at the end of the time period. They're giving you your p-value over 5 years. Which offer should Casey choose? Show all working to justify your answer. But guys, how are you going to decide which one is better? What working are you going to do? You're going to have to use the simple interest formula and do the 13% per annum simple interest on that one. Then you're going to have to do compound interest formula with 12%. Get your 2A values, and the bigger one is the better option. Okay, so that is what you have to do. They're not telling you calculate this and then decide, but you need to know that that is how you're going to complete it. Okay, the one that gives you a bigger amount out at the end of the, 5 years, and that would be A. Okay. Yeah. So it would probably be 2 marks for the compound one, 2 marks for the simple one, and 1 mark for your conclusion. Okay. 1.2, he buys a laptop that costs 6,000 Rand. Okay, so are we seeing cash price is 6,000? He pays 5% deposit. So that deposit is going to be 5%, so 5 over 100 times 6,000. And takes out a 24-month hire purchase loan on the balance. When it's hire purchase, we know it's going to be simple interest. 24 months, how many years is that? 2 years. All right, so your end value is not going to be 24, it's going to be 2. Interest charge is 12.5% per annum. Guys, do you notice they're not saying simple interest? That's because you must know that for hire purchase, it is always simple interest. Okay. In addition, a monthly insurance premium of 50 Rand is required. So now again, there's insurance here, but they're telling you every month you need to pay 50 Rand for insurance. Okay. Calculate the cash deposit. I think you all know how to find that. 5 over 100 times 6,000. Next one, we use monthly repayments. All right, now guys, if you have, sure, I don't know why it's only 2 marks. That's quite a few marks for all the work in there. Let's see. So you would have to find your A value first. All right, so you would have to do cash price minus deposit. That's your balance, which is your new P value. Then you put that in your formula to get A. Then you divide that by 24. And then remember that for the monthly repayments, you have to add 50 Rand for insurance every month. Okay, so you can calculate your monthly repayments like you always do, and then just plus 50. I don't think this mark allocation is right. Okay, I think it should be worth more marks there. The total amount that Mahir actually pays for the laptop, including insurance. So remember, the total amount repaid is your A value plus your deposit. But now if they say including insurance, if it's 50 Rand insurance for 24 months, that's going to be 50 times 24 that you must also add. Okay, so this one is going to be A plus deposit plus 50 times 24. Okay. 1.3, Mazile invested 20,000 Rand in an account. 9 years later, there was 33,500 in his account. Guys, which one is bigger? 33,500. So that is your A amount. Okay, that is your P amount. N is 9. Determine the simple interest rate as a percentage per annum. That's like what we just did in 7.3. You use your formula and you solve for I. You move everything away from first the bracket and then from I, and then you times by 100. Okay, remember for your interest rate, you have to always times it by 100 at the end. Okay, guys, that's 19 marks. And it's not too bad. Okay, I think you guys could do these questions, right? Maybe this insurance was a bit tricky, but you must just think logically about it and just remember it's 50 Rand every month. How many months are there? And so on, okay? And also, I think this should have been more marks, but possibly these 6 marks, some of them should be actually included in those 2 there. Okay, so these 2 questions might go like together. I don't know. Question 2. Now, these are the probability questions. 2 dice are thrown. Draw up a two-way table to show the difference between the possible scores. The difference between the possible scores. Okay, that's tricky. Let me show you quickly how to do that. I know that there is a memo there, but remember we just did two-way tables the other day, right? So how does a two-way table work? You don't have to copy this down. It is in the memo. So let's just talk about it quickly. You list the possible outcomes of the one thing happening at the top and the other thing at the bottom. Now, if you're throwing 2 dice, the first one can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? Those are the possible outcomes for the one die, or the one dice. What are the possible outcomes for the other one? The same, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now they're saying the difference between the numbers. So now this is saying that if your first dice is landing on a 1 and your second dice is landing on a 1, what is the difference between them? What's 1 minus 1? 0. Weird, hey? If the first one lands on 2 and the second one on 1, what's the difference? What's 2 minus 1? 1. What's 3 minus 1? See how you match them up. But now because they say difference, now you actually have to take the one minus the other one. What's 4 minus 1? 3. 5 minus 1 is 4. 6 minus 1 is 5. But now you have to do that for all of them. Okay? What's 1 minus 2? Negative 1. What's 2 minus 2? 0. What's 3 minus 2? 1. What's 4 minus 2? 2. What's 5 minus 2? 3. 6 minus 2 is 4. Okay, I'm not going to fill everything else in. You get the idea, all right? And it is in the memo. But that's a strange way of asking it, I suppose, where they're asking for the difference between the 2 numbers. Okay? What if they said the sum of the 2 numbers? Then you would add them together, all right? So then you would say 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. Okay, then you would do it in that way. So just, yeah, you would just need to also read the question carefully, obviously. Let's see, what are they actually asking there? What is the probability that the difference is 2? All right, so then you would have to count the number of 2's that you have in your blocks. And guys, if you have 6 and 6, you're actually going to have 36 blocks altogether. All right, remember a quick way of calculating how many blocks you have is to take the number of blocks in your one heading multiplied by the number of blocks in the other one. All right, so 6 times 6, you're going to have 36 altogether. But you can also just count the blocks once you've done your two-way table. And say there are 5 blocks with a 2 in. Then it's going to be 5 over 36. Okay, remember we did this on Friday. This is the one where you just count the blocks. All right, less than 4, greater than 5. All right, so they would all just be number of blocks over 36. Okay, next question. Oh, we almost have to go. The numbers 1 to 15 are placed in a hat, so that's 15 numbers, right? What is the probability of drawing out each of the following? An even number. Guys, now you must just think, how many even numbers are there from 1 to 15? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. 7 of them. How many numbers are there in total? 15. So the probability is 7 over 15, right? A multiple of 5. So that will be 5, 10, 15. So 3 over 15, which you can simplify, right, to 1 over 5. A number larger than 15. Guys, if the numbers 1 to 15 are in that hat, is there a number larger than 15? No. So what's the probability? If it's impossible, the probability is 0. Okay. Then question 3 is a tree diagram question, and question 4 is another tree diagram question. So these are nice ones for you to practice, okay? But the memo is on Classroom, so you can look at that maybe over the weekend when you're studying. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna open this link.